I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
Ryan gonna let it go, looking for Julio Jones, and it's intercepted. Oh, what a hit by Jones!
Welcome to episode 24. Obviously, if you watched the last couple episodes, you know what we're going to do for this episode. We're going to do top 5 wide receivers entering 2020. So, not much pre-log to go into this. Let's go right into it. Michael, you go first.
Yeah, so my number 5 wide receiver entering the 2020-21 season, I think it's going to be a bit of a surprise to not only you, but anybody watching. I think a lot of people view this wide receiver as a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, and I really thought he did too. Entering this list, I had him as a top 3 wide receiver, but when watching his tape, it didn't seem like a top 3 wide receiver to me, to be completely honest with you. And my top 5 wide receiver is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. So in 2019, DeAndre Hopkins had 1,165 receiving yards, along with 104 catches for 7 touchdowns, and his longest catch was 43 yards actually. But watching DeAndre, his separation skills were surprisingly very underwhelming. A lot of the time I saw Deshaun Watson, his quarterback, having to force the ball into very, very tight windows for DeAndre Hopkins to catch the ball. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, he has one of the largest catch radiuses in the NFL. He has a huge wingspan. He's a pretty big guy. He's pretty skinny, but still great hands, arguably the best hands in the entire NFL. But again, his separation skills were very underwhelming to me when I watched him. He's a very good route runner, but just his lack of speed and elusiveness sometimes hurts him in terms of, again, route running and just getting separated from that cornerback. I saw too many times last season Deshaun Watson having to force the ball and making a bad mistake because DeAndre Hopkins wasn't that open in single coverage or even double coverage. But again, getting into some of the positives with DeAndre Hopkins, he can run every route in the route tree from the slot and the outside. He's equally effective from the slot and the outside. That's really valuable to be a great outside wide receiver, and he's just that. I mean, in Bill O'Brien's offense, he really just did everything, and he's going to be the new Arizona Cardinals wide receiver with Kyler Murray and under Cliff Kingsbury. He's going to run a lot of short routes. He's going to run a lot of screens and just easy short completions to get that offense in rhythm. And I think later on in games for the Arizona Cardinals, late game situations, he'll be a great deep ball threat. But I am a little bit worried about Kyler Murray, a second-year quarterback, trying to force the ball into DeAndre Hopkins a little too often, and I'm a little worried that it's going to cause Kyler's interception rate to maybe be inflated.
I won't go into too much about DeAndre Hopkins. I have him higher up on my list, but I think that what you brought up about him being kind of a little bit slower and lacking separation, I think that is kind of a scare for some teams. But I think just him being able to catch the ball and him only having, I think, 2 drop balls in 2018 and then like 5 drop balls in 2019, that even if if he has close to the cornerback, he's still going to catch the ball if you force it in there. He's just that good at being able to track the ball down. And I think that kind of outweighs a lot of his speed that he's lacking.
Yeah, definitely. He really reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald in the sense that early on in his career, he was playing with a quarterback carousel, very poor quarterbacks, even had Tom Savage starting a lot of games with DeAndre Hopkins playing, and he was still able to get it done. He was still able to produce great numbers because of that huge catch radius. The ball with DeAndre Hopkins doesn't have to be right on the money every time for him to catch it, even though the cornerback might be right on his back hip. He's still great at catching the ball, going up, has a really good leaping ability. So, I mean, he's an absolutely great deep ball threat, intermediate, and short ball threat. He's such a good safety blanket for any quarterback he's going to play for.
Yeah, so going to my number 5, I'm going to have someone kind of surprising to some, might be surprising to some people, but I have Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. So he's been on the Cowboys for about 1.5 years. Traded by the Raiders 2 years ago, but 2019 he had 1,189 receiving yards with 8 touchdowns. In his 9 games with the Cowboys last year, he had 725 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. So obviously you see the production is there for him. I know we talked about last episode how Zeke is kind of the center part of that offense, but with Cooper kind of being a second fiddle to Ezekiel Elliott, he's still able to put up great numbers, and with someone who Dak Prescott at quarterback who kind of lacks some skills and more of a game manager, Amari Cooper is still able to be extremely productive. And I think he's one of the best route runners in the whole league. He can just stop on a dime and just make the cornerback miss and get extreme separation. And I think that's what separates him from a lot of people, is just his route running. I know his hands are a little bit questionable sometimes. He's sometimes a body catcher rather than with his hands, but I think his ability to really get open kind of outweighs that in some aspects.
Certainly. And now transitioning to my number 4 wide receiver, I'm actually going to have Amari Cooper, who you had at number 5. And I know a lot of people would view this as a very high place for Amari Cooper in terms of NFL wide receivers. There's so much talent at the wide receiver position in the NFL at the moment. So many guys that me and Sam, I think, left off our lists that you can view them as top 5 guys. It's a very debatable list. This is the list out of the running backs and the quarterback lists where I had the hardest time because there is so many great wide receivers. But getting into Amari Cooper, I think the number one skill and the number one most important ability for a wide receiver is to simply get open. I mean, that's a quarterback's best friend. If you can get wide open every single time you run around, and that really is Amari Cooper. Watching the tape of 10, 15 of the top wide receivers, I think Amari Cooper is hands down the best route runner in the entire NFL. His double moves are unstoppable. Now, Amari Cooper likes to operate from the slot more than he does the outside. He was still a very effective outside route runner last year, but in 2020, 2021, you're going to have Michael Gallup on the outside, who statistically was even better than Amari Cooper last year. You're going to have CeeDee Lamb. He's going to be great on the outside, so that's going to free up so much more for Amari Cooper in the slot. I mean, Amari Cooper always seems to be wide open, and when he catches a ball, he's so fast and elusive after the catch. And, I mean, he has that game-breaking speed that you want out of your wide receiver. He really makes Dak Prescott's numbers a bit inflated, as we alluded to in the last running back episode. And watching Amari Cooper highlights, Dak Prescott doesn't have the best anticipation when his throws, especially coming out of a wide receiver's break. Obviously not the most accurate quarterback either. Yeah, it really doesn't matter because of Amari Cooper's separation skills. He's always going to be wide open. So even if a pass is 1 tick, 2 tick, 3 ticks late, Amari Cooper's still going to make the catch because he's just wide open. And I know a lot of his troubles in the Raiders were both schematically and just his hands. He didn't have the greatest hands when he was on the Raiders, but I do think he improved upon that quite a lot when coming to the Dallas Cowboys. Certainly worth the first-round pick that the Cowboys trade for him. Cowboys now are set in position where they simply have the best weapons in the entire NFL, in my opinion, even better than a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, because they really have every single position. They even have a speed guy, they have a great running back, and they have a quarterback who seems to be able to get it done even in high-pressure situations. I know their offensive line has taken a bit of a hit the last couple seasons, especially this offseason, but I still think the Cowboys should be set in stone to have a great offensive season at the very least, with Amari Cooper leading the pack for those great wide receivers.
And I think for Amari Cooper to kind of maybe even move up on this list or solidify not just a fringe number 5, but set his spot as the number 5 top 5 receiver in the NFL, he really needs to fix his consistency. I know if you look at kind of his stats from each game, he had 3 yards against the Jets. He had 0 yards against the Patriots. He had a 19-yard game. I mean, but also then you look at the other spectrum, he had 147 yards against the Vikings, 226 yards against the Packers. So he has that huge upside with being able to have 126 receiving yards, but then he gets shut down by Stephon Gilmore. He's just very inconsistent, and to become a more consistent player, he'll be able to really be known as a top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, that Green Bay Packers game, that was Aaron Jones versus Amari Cooper. That was an absolutely great, fantastic game to watch. I actually watched that game today. Very entertaining game. But getting into Amari Cooper a little more upon the points you touched upon, especially that Jets and more importantly that Patriots game where you need to prove it against the best cornerback in the league. He was very injured and very banged up. Even though he did play 16 games in the season, he should have probably played only 12, 13 because he really was banged up for the latter half of the season, and that really did affect Amari Cooper, and it really did affect the Cowboys' playoff push. So if Amari Cooper could stay healthy in 2020, 2021, I think we're going to see him prove a lot of people wrong in terms of those tough cornerback matchups, and I think he's going to win a lot of those matchups. His ability to get open and just stop on a dime, like you said, is just out of this world.
Yeah. So going into my number 4 wide receiver, I'm going to have Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs. So obviously everybody knows his game speed. I mean, people always see like the visuals of him running against an Olympic track people, and he's just with them. So that's just, how fast he truly is. So in 2019, he only played 12 games, but he did have 860 yards, 7 touchdowns. So he still had the production with only playing 12 games. In 2018, he had 1,479 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. So obviously, when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who has a howitzer for an arm, and then you have someone who's as fast as Tyreek Hill, it's going to be a perfect combination. Tyreek Hill is going to be able to sprint down the field, beat those cornerbacks. We talked about the speed of Amari Cooper and getting separation. But, and also Amari Cooper has kind of his route running to get separation. Tyreek Hill just has his speed to get separation, and it works so much of the time. So I think later on this list, we're going to talk about a lot of big body receivers, but Tyreek Hill is just speed, and that's how he really separates himself into a different category. It's just how fast he truly is.
Certainly, Tyreek Hill's a guy I felt so bad leaving off this list. Tyreek Hill is such a great player, such a great weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not only is he a great wide receiver, but he's a really good specialist, kick return, punt return. He's a player where every single time the ball's in the air and he's set to have the ball in his hands, you have to hold your breath as an NFL fan if you're facing the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a guy where I watch him on tape, and I'm actually very surprised that he has so many other abilities that people don't give him credit for, such as a jump ball ability. Even though he's very small in stature, he can still go up, get the ball against some shorter cornerbacks, where cornerbacks in the NFL really aren't too much taller than Tyreek Hill if they are guarding him. Usually the cornerback guarding him on the opposing team is the fastest, shortest cornerback. So he even has that ability to jump over that cornerback. And Tyreek Hill, he's another player like Amari Cooper. He doesn't need the most accurate quarterback in the NFL to still put up and maintain his stats. Obviously, that's not the case with Tyreek Hill, as he does have Patrick Mahomes, but we even saw in the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes' processor was definitely off. I think Patrick Mahomes played a little bit nervous in the Super Bowl, so we saw that very infamous play where Tyreek Hill was wide open. Patrick Mahomes was very late on the read, and he still hit Tyreek Hill because of how wide open he was. Tyreek Hill, I think, just behind Amari Cooper, is the best in the league in terms of just double moves on his routes. He really reminds me of an even faster version of Antonio Brown when he gets to the second level. So Tyreek Hill, I definitely felt bad leaving him off this list. He's a great player. So getting into my number 3 wide receiver in the league, and this is a guy that I had him as a top 5 fringe guy, but when I turned on his tape, I was more surprised than any player I've really seen watch tape thus far in the 2019 season. That's going to be Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 13 games last season, Mike Evans had 67 catches for 1,157 yards. He had 8 touchdowns with 17 yards a catch, which is just incredible. That was 3rd in the NFL among players with over 60 catches, and that's going to be behind Kenny Golladay and Stephon Diggs. But when watching Mike play, it is so surprising to see how wide open he is all the time and how fast he really is for a huge guy. Mike Evans is a guy where he's 6'5" and he's 225 pounds. He's a guy where he can have horrible separation skills and he can still get away with being a great wide receiver because of how big he is, how great of a jump ball ability he has. But that's absolutely not the case with Mike Evans. He's so surprisingly fast. He's even faster than a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. He even has greater separation skills than a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. That's why I had him above a DeAndre Hopkins, and I had him above a guy like Amari Cooper, and even above guys like Tyreek Hill that you had on your list because of his jump ball ability. You can just simply throw the ball up to Mike Evans, and he's going to come down and catch the ball. So many times on tape when I watch him play, I saw Jameis Winston just absolutely lollipop balls, underthrow balls so much. But Mike Evans would always catch the ball because he was either A, wide open because of his separation and speed, or B, he just has that great jump ball ability and he can catch it over any cornerback in the entire NFL. I mean, again, he's a great route runner. He creates so much separation. And even when he doesn't, obviously, again, like I said, he goes up and gets the ball. I mean, he runs mainly intermediate to long routes, but he will and does catch screen passes all the time. So Mike Evans is my number 3 wide receiver.
Yeah, I think if you look, just see how productive. I don't have Mike Evans on my list. I'll preface that, but just looking at how productive he is with a quarterback like Jameis Winston is extremely surprising. I mean, once you get someone like Tom Brady who is smarter and will make the better reads and won't, kind of like you said, lollipop throws up and have a more direct strike to the wide receiver, I think we can see Mike Evans having one of the best seasons we've seen in a while from out of a wide receiver. I think he's really that good, and just pairing him up with Chris Godwin, I mean, they're the best 1-2 punch in all of football at wide receiver. So I mean, like you said, there's so many talented wide receivers. We're truly in the golden age of wide receiver, and it was hard not to have him on this list, but I see where you're coming from when you have him.
Yeah, Mike Evans, and it's kind of the same story throughout his entire football career. He's had such great separation skills, such great jump ball skills, and he's had quarterbacks who aren't too accurate. Watching him at Texas A&M playing with Johnny Manziel would really just run around the pocket, extend the play for 5-10 seconds, which is just unheard of. That's how good Johnny Manziel was at creating at the college level, but he would just simply lob it up 50-50 ball to Mike Evans. There would be 4 defenders around him, and he would still go up and grab the ball. I mean, it looks like a high schooler playing Pop Warner when you watch Mike Evans play at Texas A&M. That's how really good and dominant he was at A&M. He's a guy where I think he makes his quarterbacks look much better, but now he's going to be playing with arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. So again, like you said, I think he's in store for a great season with Tom Brady under center.
Yeah, he's just a big body, and it looks like he's like a center getting a rebound over power forwards when he's playing. So moving on to my number 3, someone you already mentioned, I have DeAndre Hopkins of formerly the Texans, now the Arizona Cardinals, but I'm not going to go too much into him since we really talked about him before, but I just think DeAndre Hopkins, he doesn't drop the ball. He is so consistent, and he's a game changer. I know we talked about, 2 years ago, the Texans versus the Cowboys, they were driving, and he had that massive play that really changed the momentum of the game when he had 2 spin moves in one play, and kind of really opened up a lot of things for the Texans to win that game. I just think he's so consistent. He's quiet. He's not a loud mouth like a lot of these wide receivers in the NFL today, like someone like Odell, who we both left off our list. But he just goes about his business. He's so consistent. That's why I'm have him at number 3.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is a guy. It's a shame his last 2 games as a Houston Texan, I mean, he absolutely showed out. He absolutely played like he kind of even knew that was going to be his last 2 games as a Houston Texan, because he really put his heart on his sleeve, and he just went out and performed against the Bills. Great game against the Bills. And he even had a better game against the Chiefs, where the Texans really blew that lead, and really wasn't his fault. But DeAndre Hopkins, great guy. Love watching him talk. I mean, every single time he scores a touchdown, he runs into the stands and finds his mom and gives the ball to his mom. I mean, he's a really great human being like that. I mean, he's going out here for Black Lives Matter, and he's doing so much for his community and even his new community for the Arizona Cardinals. So as an Arizona Cardinals fan, I am absolutely stoked to have Nuke on my team, because he's just, not only is he a great football player, he's a top 5 wide receiver, but he's a locker room guy, and he's a great guy where the Arizona Cardinals, only thing they've had in their franchise history is a great wide receiver, one of the greatest wide receivers in the NFL. And I can't think of a better player and a better person for the Arizona Cardinals franchise and Larry Fitzgerald to pass the torch to than DeAndre Hopkins. So going into my number 2 wide receiver in the NFL entering the 2020 NFL season, I'm going to have Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas statistically was by far the best wide receiver in the NFL, hands down. He had 107 yards per game, which led the NFL, 149 catches, which again led the NFL, and again leading the NFL in receiving yards with 1,725 yards, 9 touchdowns, with his longest catch being 49 yards. I mean, his yardage total is the most by a wide receiver since 2015, set by Antonio Brown and Julio Jones, respectively. And I mean, he's only missed 1 game in his career thus far. And I know a huge knock on Michael Thomas, very popular to really knock him on this right now is his limited route tree, consisting of mainly outs and slants and screens. But to that, I say, if cornerbacks know what route he's going to run, then why don't they stop him? And so many times I mean, he's a player like Larry Bird in the NBA. I know there's a lot of stories of Larry Bird telling the defense exactly what he's going to do, and he's going to do it on them anyway. That's how great he is. That's how I view Michael Thomas. He could tell the cornerback, I'm going to run a slant route for 5 yards, and I'm going to take it to the house, and he's going to do exactly that. Michael Thomas is just a great player.
Yeah, number 2, I also have Michael Thomas. He is talk about consistency with DeAndre Hopkins, and he is also so consistent. Michael Thomas, last year 1,725 receiving yards. That is the most since Julio and Antonio Brown both broke 1,800 in 2015. I mean, and he broke the single season record, passing Marvin Harrison for most catches in this season. So we talked about how Patrick Mahomes Tyreek Hill is the best weapon for Patrick Mahomes just because of his speed and Patrick Mahomes' arms. And, I mean, Drew Brees is kind of limited to where he can throw the ball. So Michael Thomas is so perfect for Drew Brees because he's a short kind of intermediate route runner, and that's really they're gonna help each other out just the way their games are crafted. I know Michael Thomas has some off the field problems. He's a little bit of a loudmouth. Some people kind of question his character, but his skill on the field is second to none, really. I mean, just being able to catch the ball the way he does and just how consistent he truly is one of a kind, really.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, coming out of Ohio State, he has absolutely game-breaking speed. He has a great jump ball ability, which I was surprised to see when watching him, how great of a jump ball player he really is. I mean, a great feel for the field. He's another guy. He can run any route really he wants. It's just that the New Orleans Saints offense, and especially his quarterback, Drew Brees, can't really throw too much down the field. So they really ask him to run those short to intermediate routes. But again, he can play from the slot or the outside. And I'm really yet to see a cornerback lock him up all game in the NFL yet. I know I watched the Saints-Cardinals game this season, and I mean, he absolutely torched Patrick Peterson, play in and play out. It was very embarrassing. And after the game, I really wanted the Cardinals to trade Patrick Peterson. That's how bad Michael Thomas really torched him. I mean, it was absolutely embarrassing. And then next week, we saw Patrick Peterson, the same Patrick Peterson, absolutely lock up Odell Beckham on the Browns. So, I mean, that really speaks to Odell Beckham and how much he's fallen off, really, since he's been on the Giants. I think it's going to be a prove-it year for Odell Beckham. But anyways, getting into Michael Thomas a little bit more, I know another knock on him is, oh, you've been playing with Drew Brees. He's a great quarterback. Drew Brees makes you better. And to that, I'd say turn on the film because you're going to find that the opposite is true. Michael Thomas makes Drew Brees better. Michael Thomas makes Teddy Bridgewater better, not the other way around. So Michael Thomas is a great wide receiver. Again, he's a guy where you can tell the cornerback what route he's running, and he's still going to beat him.
And we always talk about kind of how like a tight end is the quarterback's best friend, their safety blanket. But for the Saints, Michael Thomas is that safety blanket because, I mean, you can have wide receivers running down the field. You have Kamara running a swing route, but if you're in trouble, you're just going to dump it off to Michael Thomas, and he'll get you 10 yards, 15 yards, and he's always there for you.
Yeah, the Saints offense, along with the Houston Texans offense, and even going to Arizona for DeAndre Hopkins, those two wide receivers, as great as they are really a safety blanket. They're the wide receivers' best friends when they really don't have that tight end that is going to run those check down options. So great safety blankets. But without further ado, me and Sam are going to have the same number one wide receiver in the NFL. He's been the best wide receiver in the NFL for a couple years now, in my opinion. That's going to be Julio Jones. So Julio Jones, in 15 games, he had just under 1,400 yards with 99 catches and 6 touchdowns, with his longest catch being 54 yards. He led the league in scrimmage yards per touch with 13.8 yards, and he has for the last couple seasons, which is absolutely incredible. I like that stat a lot, but he's consistently been a top 2 wide receiver for the past 6 years. And for people to say this is Julio Jones' worst statistical season in 6 years, I mean, that really speaks to how great Julio Jones truly is. He's been so consistent and so great. He's such a great route runner, always seems to get open, incredible speed, incredible size, runs every single route in the route tree. I mean, there's really nothing to knock Julio Jones on. Great hands, has an incredible stiff arm. He's so good after the catch. And I mean, he really was vital to Matt Ryan's 2016 MVP campaign, so vital to their Super Bowl run, and had an absolutely fantastic game against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Really reminded me of Terrell Owens for the Eagles in the Super Bowl versus the Patriots. Same result for those two wide receivers in the Super Bowl versus the Patriots. Great games, but their teams just fell short.
Yep. Obviously, I also have Julio Jones. He's just so good. I mean, obviously, as of recent, his numbers are kind of down, but I think that's the fault of Matt Ryan not performing up to his expectations. The Falcons organization not performing up to their expectations. I mean, they still have Dan Quinn as their head coach. I personally think he should have been fired kind of the year after they lost the Super Bowl. They haven't made it back since then. But I mean, looking at his stats, he's a 2-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. He has the second most yards in a single season, which is just over 1,800 yards behind Calvin Johnson, who was, I believe it was 1,900 yards in a single season. He's so big, he's fast, and he's just impossible to guard. I mean, 99 receptions this year, 6th in the NFL, and 14.1 yards per reception. So he's not one of those guys who are just next to the quarterback like Michael Thomas. He's going out deep every time, and he's making big plays for your team. I think this year the Falcons really need to step it up. I mean, they always build a great offense around them, and hopefully this year they can make. I mean, I know they're in a very tough division with the Saints and the Buccaneers and the Panthers, but I think with Todd Gurley, that might be able to open up a lot of things, and Julio Jones can have a very explosive year.
Yeah, Julio Jones is, I mean, just a physical specimen. He's an absolute freak. I was watching the mic'd up game of the Falcons playing the Arizona Cardinals just this past season, and before the game, Larry Fitzgerald took Kyler Murray by the arm, walked him over to the end zone and said, "Look at this guy. He is a physical freak. He's the best player in the entire NFL. I mean, you're going to watch him play today from the sideline. You're going to be absolutely amazed." And of course, Larry Fitzgerald was talking about Julio Jones. I mean, he's so great in that aspect. I mean, again, he just has no weaknesses to his game. He can run any route in the route tree. He's another guy where he's so great, and he's been so consistently great. He's been proven that he's great, yet he's so wide open. That's so frustrating for other teams and other fans of other teams to watch Julio Jones get so wide open. How could a guy not be double teamed every single play? But in reality, he does get double teamed every single play, but because of his route running skills, because of his speed and size and physicality, he still gets wide open so consistently. And that is what is so great about Julio Jones.
And also, kind of a sidebar, like some of my most fun things to watch about Julio Jones is Matt Ryan throwing an interception and Julio Jones just kind of leveling him. He's a great tackler as well. And I mean, one of the interceptions, the guy was taken to the house, and you see how fast Julio Jones truly is because he's able to track them down and prevent a touchdown. So he has it all. He's a huge body. He's the size of a power forward in the NBA, and he's still as fast as someone like, or he's a little slower, but on the same level as someone like Tyreek Hill. I mean, he just has it really all. Matt Ryan can do a little 5-yard screen pass, and he'll be able to take it 30, 40 yards. He's a combination of everything.
Yeah, that's a great point you made about Julio Jones tackling defenders when they make an interception. It's absolutely hilarious to see Matt Ryan just not throw a good ball. And then I know a couple plays where Julio Jones isn't even on the screen, and at the 10-yard line when the defender's about to enter the end zone, I mean, he just absolutely mauls them from behind. Julio Jones would be one of the best safeties in the NFL, if not the best safety, if he really tried to perfect his craft on it. That's how great of an athlete and just great of a football player Julio Jones really is.
Yeah, so obviously there's some big names that we left off this list. So, I mean, you have people like the likes of Davante Adams, Odell Beckham, Chris Godwin. I mean, looking at someone like Odell, I mean, his first 2 years kind of seemed to be like the peak of his career, and he's just kind of gone downhill ever since. I know injuries are a big problem for that, of him not being as consistent. I think with the Browns offense, having Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, a young Baker Mayfield, them really solidifying the offensive line for Baker to get more time to pass, I think Odell really needs to step it up to be able to be considered one of the best receivers in the league like he once was.
Yeah, sadly, I've been saying this since Odell Beckham's rookie season. He just really lacks maturity. I mean, even a guy like Michael Thomas, I do get the sense that Michael Thomas wants to win more than anything, but Odell Beckham, he just wants to get his stats. I think he does care about his stats more than his team's success. I mean, he's a guy where for years people have been defending him, saying that he's going to mature one day, and he went to the Browns, he's mature now, and I just have not seen that out of Odell Beckham at all. He's a player where I get the sense that the quarterback is genuinely nervous to not throw the ball to Odell Beckham because they're just nervous about what's going to come, not only in the locker room, but on the sideline from Odell Beckham if he doesn't get targeted 10 times a game. And that's just very unrealistic when you're on a team in general, but especially a team like the Cleveland Browns that really do have so many weapons. So Odell Beckham, I mean, I don't think he's ever going to mature, but to become a top 5 wide receiver like he was his first 2 years, because he certainly was. And I know he was unhealthy last season. So that's something where I will give him a little credit for, and I will give him a bit of a break for. But I do think Odell Beckham needs to solidify himself in terms of being a top wide receiver again. Also, another knock I do have on Odell Beckham, I think he's better at the tougher catches than the easier catches. I see too many times with Odell Beckham, he turns field and tries to get yards after the catch without even catching the ball first, which causes him to drop the ball sometimes. But Odell Beckham, I mean, in that new Cleveland Browns offense, I do think they're going to be run-oriented. They have Austin Hooper that they just paid so much money to. They still do have some decent weapons on that offense. Obviously, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry. So I don't really see statistically Odell Beckham getting too much better than he was on the New York Giants for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, going back to what you said about his catches, I think kind of his muscle memory is used to kind of one-hand catches and making those difficult catches. So once kind of it's an easy pass for him, he kind of just, his body just, I don't know, just forgets how to catch the ball normally. I mean, we talked about this in one of our first episodes, how against the Panthers, he was playing pretty great against Josh Norman, and then he dropped one of the biggest balls that could have been a potential game winner. So he's really lacking maturity, and he's lacking kind of like the easiest parts of football, really.
Yeah, he is. And I mean, he's a great athlete. I do think he's one of the best athletes in the entire NFL, which is really incredible when you have a league full of athletes. He's a guy where before the game, you'll see him kicking 35-yard field goals. And then in game, you'll see him throwing the ball for 50 yards, really off his back foot with ease. So Odell Beckham is a great talent. I mean, he's a guy where you do need to still double team him so often. Almost every play you need to double team him. I mean, we saw versus the Jets last year in his best game. I mean, he had that huge breakout touchdown. He still has that game-breaking speed. And I think Odell Beckham does have the potential to reach into the top 5 again this season because of, again, like I said, how many weapons the Cleveland Browns do have. I think if that takes the focus off of Odell Beckham a little bit, I do think he still warrants the best cornerback on the opposing team to guard him. But, I mean, we will see. The jury is still out on Odell Beckham. Another player we did leave off this list is a guy who he's on your favorite team. He's been the NFL receiving king for at least a year, and that is T.Y. Hilton. I think he can have a bit of a resurgence with Phillip Rivers under center. I know he didn't have the best year as a Charger last year, but I think T.Y. Hilton's another guy where he's been very under the radar and kind of low key the past couple of seasons, but I think he can have a great season this season.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about kind of the best wide receivers in the league, you have these people, but when you're talking about who's the most valuable to your team, T.Y. Hilton is easily top 5. I mean,
yeah,
if you look at the Colts record without T.Y. Hilton, it's pretty terrible. I mean, they can't really win games without him. He's a safety blanket for a lot of quarterbacks. We talked about how DeAndre Hopkins is a safety blanket, Michael Thomas is, but T.Y. Hilton is a really great safety blanket. And kind of the past couple of years, the Colts really lacked kind of depth at their wide receiver position, so he was really the only target. So having someone like Michael Pittman now and Zach Pascal kind of stepped it up last year, I think T.Y. can really have a step-up year. And, I mean, I don't know how Phillip Rivers is going to perform, but he has some great weapons around him. He has a top 5 offensive line. He has an exceptional coach in Frank Reich and a great GM in Chris Ballard. So the Colts are really making all the right moves to kind of come back from a down year.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what Jonathan Taylor does in that Colt offense. And I mean, for T.Y. Hilton, the second best weapon he's had in the last couple of years alongside him really, I think, has been Eric Ebron, who, I mean, he really isn't even the best tight end in the league. He isn't even top 5, I don't think. I mean, he had that one good year where I think he did have 15 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. But besides that, a guy like T.Y. Hilton really hasn't had the weapons around him to warrant him not getting double teamed at every play. One more guy I am going to mention, I did allude to him in one of the stats I had, but that is going to be Kenny Golladay. I mean, he's a guy I do have a bit of a sweet spot for Kenny Golladay, as I've drafted him in probably each of the last 3 or 4 fantasy drafts that I've partaken in. Kenny Golladay, I mean, he's another guy, really tall in stature. He has Matt Stafford throwing to him. I know not for the majority of last season, but this season, I think he could enter the conversation of maybe not being a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, but being a top 5 statistical wide receiver in the NFL, which is still saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Golladay, he is a very tall wide receiver, but he can move his body in certain ways that he can make any catch. I mean, he doesn't really care about if he's going to get injured on a play or not. He'll dive for the ball. He'll make some of the most spectacular catches you'll see all year. He's very comfortable with throwing caution to the wind and just laying out for any ball that's thrown to him.
Certainly, and going into this NFL season with one of the best, anticipated wide receiver draft classes that we've ever had in the history of the NFL, I'm really excited to see which rookie wide receiver, if any, could enter the top 10 wide receiver conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you have those in the first round, but then you can also see someone like Michael Pittman, shout out the Colts, who can really step up. And yeah, I'm excited to see what these rookies do as well.
Certainly, even Denzel Mims on the Jets. I mean, They really lack the weapons. I think Denzel Mims could have a breakout season as well.
So let's roll through our top 5 real quick, just to kind of summarize. I'll go first. So my number 1 wide receiver was Julio Jones. Number 2, Michael Thomas. 3, DeAndre Hopkins. 4, Tyreek Hill. 5, Amari Cooper.
Yeah, so I'm going to have at number 1, Julio Jones. Number 2, Michael Thomas. Number 3, Mike Evans. So all the guys in the same division, which is pretty incredible. Number 4, Amari Cooper. And number 5, DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, let us know what your top 5 wide receivers in the NFL are. We really enjoyed making this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed listening, and we'll see you in the next one.